650 men are marching to rescue a column that is already finished. Nobody marching knows that yet. The order is textbook. A detachment is pinned down, cut off, running low. Send reinforcements. Break the encirclement. Every drill manual in Europe endorses the move without hesitation. Lieutenant Colonel Heinrich von Breymann has his orders, 2 6-pounder guns and roughly 650 men, and he is already hours behind schedule. The road is a swamp. His wagon wheels sink to the hub. His grenadiers curse in German nobody around them can translate. Every man in his column is wearing full campaign kit built for a European road, not a Vermont hillside in a downpour. Wool coats soaked through, cartridge boxes gone heavy with damp, boots filling with mud at every step. He does not know the column he is marching to save has already surrendered. He does not know the militia waiting ahead never went home. He thinks he is a rescue force. He is about to become the second course of the same meal. How does a routine relief march turn into a second annihilation on the same afternoon, on the same stretch of road? The failure starts 4 days earlier, and it starts with horses, or rather, the absence of them. By the first week of August 1777, Lieutenant General John Burgoyne's invasion of upstate New York has stalled into a crawl. Burgoyne, 55 years old, a career soldier with a taste for theater as much as tactics, planned this campaign as the stroke that ends the rebellion in one season. Drive south from Canada, link up with British forces from New York City, and cut New England off from the rest of the colonies for good. Fort Ticonderoga fell in July, almost bloodlessly, and it convinced Burgoyne his regulars were unstoppable. An 8,000-man army that had just taken the strongest fortress in North America without a real fight. But the march south from the fort has turned into a nightmare of felled trees, sabotaged bridges, and swamp roads that American militia tore up behind them on purpose. Some days his army covers barely a mile. Burgoyne's supply line back to Canada, already hundreds of miles of lake and forest, is stretched to nearly useless, and his cavalry has no horses to speak of. 250 Brunswick dragoons, trained horse soldiers, drilled for mounted combat, armed with heavy broadswords and carbines meant to be fired from the saddle, have been marching on foot since Canada, weighed down in thigh-high leather jackboots and stiff cavalry coats never designed for walking. There were never enough animals to put under them. Draft horses and oxen for the wagon train are running short too. An army this size does not move on empty wagons for long, so Burgoyne authorizes a raid. On July 22nd, his German commander Baron Reidesel had already proposed exactly this kind of mission. Now Burgoyne acts on it. A detachment is to push into the New Hampshire grants, modern Vermont, disputed territory that both New York and a fledgling breakaway republic claim, and seize whatever horses, cattle, and provisions it finds along the way. Lieutenant Colonel Friedrich Baum, a professional officer commanding dismounted troopers of the Prince Ludwig Dragoon Regiment, gets the assignment. Baum is methodical and experienced. He also speaks almost no English. He will be operating deep in hostile country, dependent on interpreters and local loyalist guides to tell him who is friendly and who is lying to his face. And his orders, delivered through Reidesel on August 10th, keep shifting even as he prepares to march. His column numbers somewhere between 650 and 800, depending on which muster survives. A corps of dismounted dragoons, reinforced along the march by roughly 150 local loyalists, close to 60 Canadian irregulars, around 100 Iroquois warriors, and a company of British marksmen under Captain Fraser. 5 different loyalties, several different languages, at least 2 layers of translation between Baum and half his own men. He marches out of Fort Miller on the 9th of August with 2 light 3-pounder guns, a herd of empty wagons meant to come back full, and instructions to assess local sentiment, recruit any loyalists willing to join him, and avoid a serious fight unless the odds are clearly in his favor. Vague enough to leave most of the real decisions to a man who cannot read the terrain, the maps, or the people around him. Without help. On the other side of the field is Brigadier General John Stark. Stark fought at Bunker Hill. He fought at Trenton. And weeks before Bennington, he resigned his Continental Army commission entirely. Passed over for promotion in favor of a junior officer, he told Congress precisely what it could do with its rank structure, then agreed to command New Hampshire militia strictly under state authority, answering to nobody in Philadelphia. The New Hampshire Council had its own reasons to want him. They distrusted General Philip Schuyler, the aristocratic New Yorker, some suspected of treachery after Ticonderoga fell almost without a shot, and they wanted a commander loyal to New England alone. Stark is not fighting for the Continental Army at Bennington. He is fighting on his own terms with his own men, and he intends to keep it that way. Baum's orders originally point him toward the Connecticut River Valley in search of horses alone. At the last moment, verbally, never committed to paper, Burgoyne redirects him toward a supply depot at a town called Bennington, on a rumor that it sits lightly guarded, held by no more than 400 militia. It does not sit lightly guarded. Stark and something close to 1,500 militiamen are already there. Neither Baum nor Burgoyne has any idea. Baum's column crosses into New York on the 9th of August and spends 5 days foraging its way toward Bennington, gathering exactly the kind of intelligence that gets men killed. Confident second-hand reports, nothing confirmed, villagers telling scouts whatever keeps their own barns from being emptied. By the 13th, he reaches Cambridge, New York, and learns for the first time that Stark is close and in force and not retreating the way every previous report promised. He sends word back to Burgoyne asking for support. It is the first crack in a plan already built on sand. The ground Baum chooses for his stand is a low, wooded hill above the Walloomsac River, roughly 10 miles short of Bennington itself, with a single narrow bridge crossing the water below. Instead of consolidating his force into one defensible position, he spreads it thin across both banks. A redoubt of packed earth and pine logs for the dragoons and half of Fraser's marksmen on the high ground, his largest cohesive body, roughly 200 men. A separate position for the Indians on an open plateau to the northwest with no fortification at all. Loyalist and Canadian companies dug in across the river, covering the bridge approach. 5 or 6 isolated pockets in total, scattered across terrain broken by ravines and timber, none close enough to reinforce another fast, all leaning on interior lines that do not actually exist. It is a defensive plan built for an enemy that attacks from one direction. Stark has no intention of cooperating. For 2 days, nothing happens. Rain. Constant road-dissolving rain from the 14th into the 15th of August, the kind that turns musket priming powder to paste and makes a fired weapon a coin flip. Baum uses the delay to dig in deeper, hoping the weather buys time for Burgoyne's reinforcements to reach him. Stark uses it to gather every rifle within reach. Seth Warner's Green Mountain Boys are summoned down from Manchester, force marching through the same downpour. And while both sides sit soaked and waiting, Stark runs an operation that belongs in an intelligence file, not a battle report. He sends men into Baum's camp posing as loyalists. They swear the loyalty oath the Germans are administering to recruit local support. They are handed identification cards confirming they are friendly to the Crown. Then they walk back out having counted every position Baum built, every gun, every gap between his scattered redoubts. The identification problem cuts both ways, and in hindsight, it borders on farce. Neither army wears anything that reliably marks friend from enemy in these woods. Loyalists and patriots often come from the same towns, sometimes the same families, speaking the same accent. Baum's Germans, who speak no English, have been told that anyone with a strip of white paper tucked into their hatband is a friendly loyalist and should not be fired on. Stark's men have heard the same rumor from local informants. Plenty of them tuck white paper into their own hats before the fighting starts, walking within yards of German pickets who assume they are looking at reinforcements. On the 15th, Burgoyne receives Baum's request for help before dawn and treats it as routine, nothing urgent. He dispatches Breymann's 650 men that same day, but the column covers barely half the distance before dark and stops to camp in the woods, its guns already bogging in the same mud that will slow it straight into disaster the next afternoon. Help is coming. It will not arrive anywhere close to on time. The full breakdown of how a stretch of rain turned into the worst reinforcement disaster of Burgoyne's campaign is exactly the kind of forgotten mechanic we track down here at Kingdom Keys. Because the trap that catches Baum is not the same trap that catches Breymann, and that distinction is about to matter enormously. On the morning of the 16th, the sky finally clears, and both commanders know the delay is over. Stark does not attack the dragoon redoubt head-on. He splits his force into 3 converging columns, roughly 200 men under Colonels Nichols and Herrick swinging wide through the timber to hit the Loyalist and Indian positions from behind. Another 200 circling to strike the far bank and the bridge, the remainder under Stark himself, pinning the center to hold Baum's attention on the front he expects trouble from. It takes most of the afternoon to move every column into position unseen. Through cornfields and broken ground, the 2 days of rain have left soft and silent underfoot, muskets wrapped to keep the locks dry. At 3 o'clock, the flanking columns hit at once, and Stark reportedly tells his men before they move. "There are your enemies, the Redcoats and the Tories. They are ours tonight, or he is not going home to his wife." The Indian position on the open plateau collapses almost immediately, outnumbered, outflanked, with no fortification worth the name and no cover to fall back into except the tree line, which is exactly where most of Baum's Iroquois allies go and stay. Watching from the redoubt, Baum reads the sudden retreat wrong. He takes the withdrawal for exactly that, a retreat rather than what it actually is, the first jaw of a trap closing around his flank. He does not reposition. He does not know he needs to. The Loyalist and Canadian companies across the river fold soon after, cut off from Baum's main position by the exact terrain that was supposed to protect them. The bridge itself now swept by American fire from 2 directions, the men there scattering into the corn rather than standing to reload under fire they cannot see the source of. That leaves Baum and his dragoons alone on the high ground, surrounded on 3 sides, cut off from every other position he built, listening to the gunfire around them go quiet in the wrong direction, one by one. What follows is close to an hour of continuous fighting, Stark later describes as one steady clap of thunder, without a break in the noise long enough to reload calmly. The dragoons hold. They have no horses to retreat on and nowhere to retreat to, and they know it. Ammunition runs low, then lower, muskets fouling faster than damp cartridges can be reloaded, and when an American shot detonates Baum's ammunition wagon in a single column of smoke, visible across the whole field, the fight tips from grim to hopeless in an instant. Baum has one option left that fits the training he was given for a role he can no longer physically perform. He orders a saber charge. Dismounted dragoons on foot, heavy broadswords drawn, attempting a cavalry breakout with no horses under them, into a ring of Americans 3 times their number. It fails within minutes. Baum is struck down and mortally wounded in the charge. What remains of his command surrenders where it stands, and Stark's militia surges up the slope to take the position, the closest thing this battle has to a clean, decisive ending. It is not the ending. Stark's men do not get time to celebrate. While they are still disarming prisoners and hauling looted supplies off the field, muskets stacked, wagons rifled, the discipline of the last hour already loosening into the chaos of victory, Breymann's column finally arrives. Hours late, exhausted from dragging 2 6-pounders through mud all day, it marches straight toward the high ground, assuming the position still belongs to Baum. It does not anymore. Breymann sees Americans scattered and disorganized across open ground, reads it as an opportunity rather than a trap, and presses the attack immediately. For a few minutes, it works. Stark's militiamen, spread thin and busy looting, are caught off guard and start falling back in genuine disorder, the momentum of the entire afternoon threatening to reverse in the space of a few volleys. Then Seth Warner's Green Mountain Boys arrive. Roughly 350 fresh men, having pushed the final miles at pace specifically to reach the field before dark, hit Breymann's flank at almost the exact moment his advance stalls against Stark's rallying line. Warner knows this ground. He has scouted it for days, waiting exactly for this moment, and his men come in already spread to fire and move rather than stand in the open the way Breymann's grenadiers are trained to. The fighting that follows runs close to 2 hours, a running exchange pushing back and forth across the same muddy ground. Baum's men bled on hours earlier, volley answering volley, until the light finally fails, and neither side can tell friend from enemy at more than a few yards. Breymann's own horse is shot from under him, and he takes a wound to the leg, but he stays with his column as it is pushed back yard by yard, the 2 6-pounders slowing every attempt to disengage in good order. He finally orders a retreat under cover of darkness. He has lost close to a quarter of his own 650 men and every gun he brought onto the field, abandoned in the mud because there are no longer enough hands or horses to haul them out. The reinforcement column, sent to rescue a detachment that no longer exists, becomes the second column wiped out on the same stretch of road on the same afternoon. By nightfall on August 16th, the numbers tell their own story. Estimates vary slightly between surviving records, but the consensus lands close to 200 German and British dead and roughly 700 taken prisoner out of a combined Baum and Breymann force of around 1,350 men, meaning roughly 2 out of every 3 men sent out from Burgoyne's camp on this mission end the day dead or in American hands. American losses run to approximately 30 killed and 40 wounded, a lopsided ratio that turns what could have been a minor skirmish into one of the most decisive single-day defeats of the entire war for Burgoyne's army. 4 captured cannon and a stack of small arms go back to Bennington with the prisoners, marched through streets lined with locals who have waited 2 years for a win this complete. Baum himself does not die on the field. He lingers 2 more days before succumbing to his wound, reportedly telling those around him that the militia he faced fought, in his own words, more like hellhounds than soldiers. The damage to Burgoyne's campaign runs deeper than the body count. He has lost close to 1,000 trained soldiers he cannot replace on this continent, drawn from an army that started with only 8,000 to begin with. He still has no horses for his dragoons and no draft animals for his wagons. The entire purpose of the raid, unmet, at the cost of 2 entire detachments. His Native American allies, watching a supposedly invincible column torn apart by farmers with muskets, largely abandon him in the weeks that follow, taking their scouting knowledge of the terrain with them. Combined with the repulse of a separate British column at Fort Stanwix roughly 2 weeks earlier, Bennington strips away 2 of the 3 prongs meant to converge on Albany and cut New England off from the rest of the colonies. George Washington, watching from a distance, calls it plainly: the great stroke struck by General Stark near Bennington. 2 months later, surrounded and starving, Burgoyne surrenders his entire remaining army at Saratoga, a defeat that convinces France to enter the war openly on the American side, with Bennington very often counted as the first domino in that chain, and with Vermont still marking the 16th of August as a state holiday 2.5 centuries later. What this battle leaves behind, in strict military terms, is a warning repeated in staff colleges for the next 2 centuries: the danger of reinforcing failure blind. Send help without knowing what actually happened to the men you are sending it to, and you do not rescue a disaster. You feed it a second course. Breymann did not lose because his men fought poorly. He lost because he marched into the same trap his predecessor never escaped, with no better information than the man he had been sent to save. Baum was ordered into hostile ground with translators standing between him and every warning he needed to hear. Breymann was ordered to rescue him on nothing but a request scrawled hours before it reached him. Neither man failed through cowardice. They failed because the disaster outran the orders meant to fix it. If you had commanded that relief column, half your intelligence a rumor, your guns buried in mud, daylight running out fast, no word of what actually happened up ahead. Do you press the attack the way Breymann did, or do you hold back and wait for real information, knowing every hour of delay might be the hour that finishes off the men you were sent to save? Leave your answer below. And if you want the next collapse in this campaign, the 60 days between this field and Burgoyne's surrender at Saratoga, that record gets pulled apart piece by piece right here on Kingdom Keys.